Ciao friends! I want to show you how you can use a Power BI desktop in order to investigate on a slow report. And there is a tool called Performance Analyzer that can help you finding the bottleneck in your reports. Before showing you Performance Analyzer, think about what happens when you open a report or you interact with a report. When I click on a new brand in this slicer, as soon as I click the brand, all the other visuals are updated. If you think about what is required in order to refresh these visuals, every visual has to request data from the database in order to retrieve the numbers that are displayed, for example, in this table, in order to render this map, or in order to update this bar chart with the numbers that correspond to the selected brand. And every time I select a new brand, all these queries have to run again and all the visuals have to refresh the report. Now, Performance Analyzer is a tool that you can find here in View in the button Performance Analyzer, and when I click on Performance Analyzer, a new pane is open here. As you see, the pane doesn't do anything. There is an important button here that is Start Recording. So what happens when I click Start Recording? Performance Analyzer starts to listen to all the events generated by all the user interface elements of your report that can produce an update of the visuals. So if I start recording at this point, nothing happens until I do something on the report. So let me show you here what happens when I click on a slicer choosing a different brand. You see that something happened here, and when I click on another brand, something else happened here. So now we can focus on the content of this Performance Analyzer, and we can try to understand what is going on. As you see, we had two events. Changes the slicer, but we could have also the selection of a bar chart or other. You can see that there are 4 visualizations, and the time here that you see displayed says, okay, the slicer has been refreshed in 103 milliseconds. The time is always in milliseconds. Then the sales amount by country has been refreshed in 271 milliseconds, and so on. Now, sometimes the name of the visual cannot be easy to detect, and it is useful to know that when I click on a visual, on a name here in the Performance Analyzer, the corresponding visualization is highlighted in the report. This can help you finding the visual when the name is not enough to understand what is the visual involved. Now, once I click this element, there are other numbers here that are interesting. You see that for a slicer we have 3 elements, but actually for every visual we have a detail of 3 voices, 3 items that tells me how the time has been spent. We have DAX query, visual display, and other. Let me open something like the top 10 customers, because we have more interesting numbers. What I see here is the following. The top 10 customers table that you see here has been refreshed in 356 milliseconds. Now, what happens for every visual? The visual has to request the data from the database, and in order to do that, it generates a DAX query. Then the result of this DAX query is considered by the visual in order to update, to, we say, render, to draw the content of the visualization. Sometimes this content could be a map, sometimes a content could be a table or a chart. No matter what is the visual, the result of a query is just a table with numbers. So the DAX query tells me how much time the Power BI report waited for the database to execute your DAX query, whereas visual display is the time that Power BI spent reading this data and rendering the report. You can imagine that if you have a complex map with thousands of points, the time required to render the visual will be larger than the time required to render just a couple of points in the same map. But there is an interesting consideration about the time that is called other. As you can see, my top 10 customers spent just 56 milliseconds of the 356 milliseconds for the entire visual. So I could say, even though I optimize the DAX query, I will not recover much time. If the visualization is slow, it is not the DAX query that is slow in this case. Is it the visual display? Not much, because also the visual display didn't take the larger amount of the time for the visualization. But what is this other? Well, this other time, which in this case is a very big number compared to top 10 customer, we're talking about 70–80% of the time, 236 milliseconds have been spent waiting for other visualizations or for other operations in Power BI Desktop. Can you optimize the other time? No. The only thing you can do, you can just reduce the number of visualizations in the report. In this particular case, we should not be concerned about this time, because this time cannot be cumulated with other time, the same other time of other reports. You can imagine that you can sum the visual display time or the DAX query time, but it doesn't make sense to sum other, because actually this is waiting time and many different people wait for the same amount of time blocked by another visual, for example. So this is the way we can collect this data, but what if we want to make sure to analyze all the visuals in a report? Well, we have this button, Refresh Visuals, that will require a complete refresh of all the visuals. Sometimes when you click on a slicer, you may update only a few visuals in the report because others are not connected to that slicer. So before doing this refresh visuals, I can also clear my performance analyzer list because I want to get rid of this list. And now I want to create a single refresh so that I will have every visuals only once in this list. And if I do that, what I get is that there is a new execution of the rendering of each visual without the user doing any action. And if you see, the event name is refreshed visual. Now, I can continue analyzing the numbers this way, but of course, in order to understand why a particular DAX query or a particular visualization is slow, it requires to enter in more details about the DAX query plan or how you build a custom visual, which is the topic of other videos. However, there is still a feature that I want to show you about Performance Analyzer, which is export. And of course, just stop the recording. But export enables me to save in a file, in a JSON file, the information about the recording that I obtained since the last clear. So if I save this file, what I have is a text file, is actually a JSON file that contains all the details of what I'm seeing here in Power BI. This file will be useful from other tools that can offer different visualizations of these numbers and maybe sometime more details. What is this file? I can show you that this file is basically a text file. You see that this JSON file that I saved now is something that I can open with a Notepad, or Notepad++ in this case, just to show you that even though this file is a text file, is a JSON file, it has a number of detailed information that could be overwhelming. Maybe we want to use DAX Studio, which is a tool that can open this file and show these numbers in a different way, providing further analytics in order to investigate more in what happened in your slow report. So Performance Analyzer is a tool that can retrieve data that can help you understanding where is the bottleneck in your report. You can open this file with other tools like DAX Studio that offers additional features to investigate about these numbers. Enjoy DAX!